Polymer clay is one of the most versatile mediums to get crafty with at home. Perfect for both novices and experienced crafters, the soft, moldable modeling clay is ideal for a wide range of projects and crafts. From ornate jewelry to intricate figurines, you're going to be surprised at what you can create with it. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful ombre earrings with just 2 colors of polymer clay, a few tools, and a few simple steps. Welcome to My Modern Met Maker. We're going to be showing you some of the coolest crafts and the tools that you're going to need to complete them at home. My name is Lacey. I am My Modern Met's in-house maker, and I am so excited to get started. The supplies you're going to need for this project are 2 colors of polymer clay. I'm going to be using Sculpey Primo here in black and teal. You'll also need a clay roller, a clay slicer, the shape or cutter of your choice. It's helpful to have a toothpick to pop any air bubbles. You'll need a baking sheet with parchment paper, metal findings to finish off your piece, something to sand to clean the edges with, and it's helpful to have a pair of pliers to finish this off too. The total time to complete this project is going to be about 2 hours, but you're only going to need about 30 to 45 minutes of active working time. In this tutorial, we're going to be making a gradient with polymer clay, which is the real skill that you're going to be learning here. I'm going to be turning them into some really pretty earrings, but you can turn them into whatever you'd like to. In order to make one of these ombre gradient type patterns, you're going to need to start with 2 colors of clay. They can either be custom mixed colors or straight from the package like what I'm using here. I find to make the gradient, the easiest way to do this is to make some graduated steps between the initial color, that teal, and that black. So to do this, I actually take some of the teal just straight from the block, make a little ball, and set that to the side. Then I want to make a teal that is a little bit darker, just 1 step darker and closer to the black than the initial teal. So I'm going to take a chunk of that teal and add a little bit of the black and mix it in completely. I'm going to do this a few more times, changing the ratios to where I get to be more black than teal towards the end, and ultimately then to just black. The more steps that you put in between the 2 colors, the easier that this gradient is going to come along, but you'll need at least an in-between one and then the 2 original colors. Then I like to turn these into kind of square logs so I can push them together better and they have more surface area to actually squish together before I start to roll these out. Side note, at this point you can actually also use a pasta roller, but I wanted to show you how to do this without one in case you don't have it. Roll out these different blocks that you made into vertical columns of the colors, and then you're going to do this step a whole bunch of times where you fold this over, and you want to keep these close to the original position so that you're trying to preserve those colors as they are, but you want them to overlap just a little bit to the side so that with each layer that you overlap just a little bit to the side, it's going to slowly start to blend those gradients between colors. It's best to keep this as a gradient square as much as you can so that you can preserve the entire colors as well as have more surface area of that full gradient. So if you need to, you can cut off the sides if they start to squish out too much and actually add them onto the bottoms to just even this out. The other thing that you should be aware of is when you are folding these over, you want to fold them over and push at the crease line first so that you're not trapping air bubbles within this. If you do find air bubbles at this point when you are rolling them out, you can either take the side of your slicer or a toothpick to pop those bubbles. It's better to discover them now while the clay is still wet and you're still working on it and can be combined in than after you've baked. Continue to do this. As you can see, you start to get a little bit of that gradation going on and it starts to look really pretty, but we're not there yet. We need to keep doing it. And every once in a while during this process, I like to make sure I've got all the bubbles popped and then roll this into a tight roll, keeping those colors separated squish it down, and then re-roll it out. And this actually does seem to help speed this process up because it does combine some of the back areas into the other colors, and it makes it just a little bit easier. It also helps you reshape this so that you can continue to keep more of a square shape so that you can get the full range of that gradient. As you kind of roll this out, it's going to smush in kind of unpredictable ways and not into a shape that you necessarily want it to be. Repeat these steps until you are happy with the gradient you have. Here is where I am starting to feel like mine is pretty much done, so I'm doing some last minute touches, just making sure there are no air bubbles and that I like the gradient. Once I'm happy with all of that, then I roll it out into a nice thin sheet. I like my clay to be pretty thin because I like my earrings light, and I'm also going to be adding some metal findings to these, so I want to make sure to keep it nice and light. I transfer this onto some parchment paper so that when I actually cut through, it doesn't stick to my work surface and I don't have to ruin the designs pulling them up, because we really just have one shot to cut these since we have such a unique pattern here. Once on the parchment paper, I'm going to kind of visually check where I want to actually make my cuts with my cutters. We want to keep in mind that you want to keep the gradient on them similar. So make sure you get about the same amount of teal in the top part and about the same amount on the bottom part of the darker colors. So pre-plan and kind of decide where you're going to cut from in order to make the best use of your clay, but also to make sure that your earrings are going to match each other. Now my design, I am going to be cutting off one side of these and replacing them with some brass findings. So I went ahead and did that. I personally like to poke the holes for the findings as well as the earring wires before I bake so that I kind of have a general guideline of where it's going to be, but you can also wait to do this afterwards. Once they're ready, go ahead and bake these at your clay's recommended settings. Let them cool down, and then it's time to do any cleanup that is necessary. If you have some rough edges, you can sand this off using either a hand tool or just some sandpaper. Once they're sanded off or cleaned up to how you want them to be, you're going to need to attach the findings. For this, I am using 3 brass bars for each of these sides, 6 in total. I'll also need a jump ring for each one of these, and then I'll also want some ear wires to finish these off. I like to use 2 pairs of pliers in order to attach different findings like these. I find it's easier to get into the small places. Remember that when you're opening these jump rings, you don't want to pull them apart. You want to pull them to the side so that they'll actually close nicely for you and you won't have any of your findings falling off. Attach all your findings, and once you're done, you've got this really beautiful pair of earrings with these fun metal elements and also the beautiful ombre gradient polymer clay. Thanks for watching My Modern Met Maker. If you're inspired to try this craft, you can find the links to purchase the materials you'll need in the description box below. Stick around because in just a minute we're going to be talking in depth about one of the really useful tools that we used in this video. Welcome to Tool Talk. Today I want to talk about these little felt tip polishing attachments for Dremels. You saw them in the video being used to help finish off the polymer clay earrings, and you can actually do this by hand using sandpaper or any other sort of abrasive, but using these little felt tip Dremel attachments is ideal. And that's because polymer clay is relatively soft, and using the felt tip attachments means that it's going to remove any excess areas that you don't want, help to round the edges, and polish and buff it at the same time. So it's like an all-in-one step for finishing off your polymer clay earrings. You can find these in pretty much any hardware store aisle that has Dremel attachments, but you can also purchase them online and they're relatively cheap.
I got a box of these off of Amazon for around $10 to $15 that have a ton of these, and if you're working with something soft like polymer clay, they're going to last you a really long time.